This episode of Hak5 is brought to you by Squarespace, Bex, and Dead Space. Only the dead survive.
Contrary to mainstream media's portrayal of hackers, we're not all antisocial creatures. While we may dwell in dimly lit bedrooms, poring over code, coffee, and the occasional circuit board, the fact of the matter is we seek out our peers both online and off. Enter the Hacker Conference, the epic venue to gather, converse, and consume copious amounts of beer. So, last week, Darren and I set off to San Diego for Tourcon 2008 to speak with some of the presenters and get an idea of what this con is all about. Of course, not everything went according to plan. More on that later. After a long and uneventful flight, we made it to San Diego, and before Tourcon officially started, we had the chance to meet up with Robin Wood to talk about the Jasager. And where better a place than atop a decommissioned aircraft carrier?
Hey guys, what's up? We're here on the USS Midway and I'm finally catching up with Robin Wood. Robin, so good to finally have you on. You guys probably know Robin. He's a developer extraordinaire, the man behind the pineapple. Yes, it's for real a pineapple. And I wanted to ask you some questions about Jasager and development and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're here chilling at Tourcon and I wanted to know, how did you get involved with Karma? How did that come about?
Been on the Mad Wi-Fi mailing list, on the Wi-Fi Sec mailing list for a while. A lot of people have been asking about getting Karma running with Mad Wi-Fi NG rather than the original Mad Wi-Fi, and the general answer was you can't. So I figured it's just a bunch of patches to software drivers. I'm sure it shouldn't be too hard to convert them, so I converted them. That got me playing with it. And then people, whenever new versions came out, people kept saying, well, can you bring the drivers up to date? And I did.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when Karma was first invented, it was on the Mad Wi-Fi, and then when Mad Wi-Fi went to NG, it just was not updated?
Yeah, that was it.
Great, so we've got it updated. And how did you get into the whole Wi-Fi hacking scene in the first place?
I've always been interested in security and that kind of thing. And I used to work for a web development company. And through them I got interested in security testing web applications. Wireless is just another area that I was interested in. Started playing with it, started being on the list, and ended up doing the SANS wireless course. Learned a lot on that and progressed from there.
You'd recommend that?
Oh yeah,
nice.
Definitely.
So you've been working on Jasager for a little while now, and I'm just kind of interested in what maybe were some of the most difficult parts of getting it going and whatnot, the development.
Yeah, the obvious thing is a limited space on the phone itself, because that's what we developed it for. I originally wrote it with shell scripts, so Ash scripts, rather than Ruby. And there was a lot of messing about with sed and grep and tools like that, and I finally got fed up with that, rewrote it all in Ruby. And
the Web 2.0 way.
Yeah,
Do it with Rails, not Rails, but with Ruby.
Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, it's a lot of playing about, a lot of experimenting. The editor on the OpenWrt Vi isn't quite Vim, it's not quite Vi, so getting used to the differences. Yeah.
So why OpenWRT? Why not DDWRT? Or?
Just because that's what I had lying around.
Nice.
I've got OpenWRT on my main router at home, so I figured why not put it on the phone.
So what's really the difference between Jasager, the way it works, and something that runs Karma on like an EPC, like Karmetasploit?
At the moment, not very much. It's the idea of the Jasager is that it's a modular development. It's running on the phone, so it's a nice little compact AP. You can leave it lying around somewhere, whereas you wouldn't want to leave an EPC lying around. And even though this current version hasn't got many modules attached to it, it has been built modular, so we can expand it. And I've got lots of ideas for new modules, new features for it.
So the embedded device is really at the core of it, as opposed to something where you're just sitting down and actually using, as a PC, using it for penetration testing or something. This is really one of those things, it's a cheapie, throw a battery on it, toss it inside of a pineapple or a carton of cigarettes and leave it around somewhere.
Yeah, that's it. I heard an interview with, I think it was Josh Wright. He was saying in one of his pen tests, he took just a cheap access point and taped it underneath a chair in a reception room. And for the next couple of weeks, he had full access to their network through this access point. And then all of a sudden it disappeared. And at the end of the test, he went in and said, "Well done, somebody found it." And I went, "No, we didn't." And somebody had nicked it. So same with this, you wouldn't leave an EPC lying around, but a $30 phone you could almost disposable.
And so, well, we say right now a $30 phone, but what about hardware in the future? I mean, the phone is just a system on a chip made by Acton, and then the same thing with the Finera Plus, which you now have, so hopefully we can see development into the Finera Plus. What other hardware do we foresee, and what are the limitations there? It
will run on anything that runs, it's got an Athros chipset, and will run OpenWRT really. A lot of people are asking about the WRT54G. As far as I know, none of those have got the Athros chipset.
And that's so a Buffalo or a... yeah, okay.
So it won't run on those. You've got to have the Athros chipset. So
now, is that because of the Mad Wi-Fi?
Yes, the Mad Wi-Fi drivers only run for Athros, and the Mad Wi-Fi are the only ones that can be patched. So yeah, it's got to be Athros based.
So it's not impossible, but it's just not worth going down that road when Atheros works great?
Yeah.
Sweet. So where do you kind of see this project going?
Well, so I've got plenty of ideas for new modules and things to add on. Hopefully any new hardware. If anybody wants to send me any, I'm quite happy to play with them. So yeah, new modules.
Paint me a picture. Like what's the module? Like, okay, so you build in the structure, just kind of like how what is it? Backtrack, remote exploit. You got modules. You just pop them in the module directory. You boot up. You got an LZMA. Everything just shows up. So paint me the picture of how you envision modules working with Jasager and how that differentiates it from something like Metasploit.
If any of you have seen it, there's the drop-down list that you get on the table of connected clients. The plan is that you drop a module in, a new function appears in that list to do whatever the module does. Ideas I've got, we're talking about integrating Wi-Fi Zoo in there or part of its functionality. I'd like to be able to also call to things like Nessus and Nmap. So modules for that, you see your client, you have a drop down, you say Nmap this client or run Nessus against it. And like you said, write it with modules or modular based so that the community can build their own modules, contribute them, send them in. I'll quite happily stick them on the site, give full credits to anybody who writes them, and it'll grow from there, hopefully. Nice.
Yeah, you were telling me earlier about like some interesting ideas about actually running them in tandem, like connected to each other. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, well, obviously it would be really nice. What you want to try and do is give internet access to anybody who's connected to the AP. So if you could run two back to back, one as the Jasager running the AP, the second just with in client mode connected to the internet. So you could then battery pack the pair of them, leave them lying anywhere, leave it with complete internet access, and then you're just a man in the middle listening to everything.
Nice. On my way back on this trip, I've got a 4-hour layover in I forget what airport, but I've got my Pineapple here, and it's got a battery pack inside of it. And my idea here is I just turn him on and connect to his SSID that I have WPA'd. SSID is Pineapple, and I just connect to that. And what I hope to do with the routes is set it so that on my laptop, which I have connected via Bluetooth to my cell phone to the internet, make that the provide the tubes for the targets. So anyway, this is an awesome penetration testing tool. I'm really excited about the development, the future. We've already got a lot of people already getting active in the Jasager boards. Is that the best way to get a hold of you? Do you have another website? Where can we find out more about your projects?
The Hak5 forums, there's a Jasager forum in there. There's www.digininja.org, I'm on there, and the Jasager specific stuff is digininja.org/Jasager. And you can email me, jasager@digininja.org. We'll get questions answered as well.
Great. All right, Robin, thanks so much for coming on, and we're having a blast, so let's just go check out some more of this aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Darren's travel tip number 74. If you'll be passing through airport security with a battery-powered phone router stuffed inside a plastic pineapple, be sure to take it out of your carry-on bag and place it into one of the plastic bins. Yes, I was taken aside for questioning, and it turns out it does in fact look like a big yellow grenade on the X-ray. Now this travel tip is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is a publishing system for anyone looking to build a blog, a portfolio, or any kind of website. With Squarespace, Dropboxes, photo galleries, forums, and blogs are just some of the features that can be built in just minutes without ever touching source code. They'll be building the new LAN Party / Hak5 gaming clan site in the coming weeks, so send us your ideas of what to include. We're excited to be working with them, as it turns out they've been fans of Hak5 since Season 1. Anyway, you can get a 2-week free trial without credit card or commitment at squarespace.com. Check it out.
So after exploring the aircraft carrier a little more, we made our way to Tourcon. It goes without saying that shooting at a hacker conference is a bit complicated. We make every effort never to film the face of anyone without permission. That said, the next likely guest was none other than Dan Griffin.
So Dan, Tourcon, you're talking about hacking SharePoint. What's going on, man?
Well, yeah, I'm actually really excited to be at Tourcon again. This is, I think, my third Tourcon presentation, fourth Tourcon presentation, actually. And there's actually 4 things that I'm going to talk about for hacking SharePoint. And the first is, as you and I were just talking about before we got started, is how SharePoint has kind of taken over the world in terms of, well, actually, Gartner predicts that SharePoint will be more common than network file shares in the next 2 years. Which I think is kind of a scary concept.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing to think about. For the people that aren't familiar with SharePoint, and I know all of you sysadmins are shaking your head right now, is that it started out as a free service that came with Windows Server 2003.
That's right.
It's for team collaboration, it does versioning, and yeah, it's basically a really nice front end for a web dev when you really get down to it. But yeah, so it's a Microsoft thing for collaboration that's now built into Office 03, 07. It's really tight integration. Sweet piece of software.
Yes.
I love it. I know a bunch of sysadmins that swear by it. So where's the vulnerability? What's the problem with everybody adopting this? Isn't it much better than just a regular folder share?
In terms of, I mean, it depends on how you look at it, of course. From a user perspective, yes, it is much better than a folder share because it's much easier to use. But then the trade-off is then, of course, you have to look at what that default security model is. Mm-hmm. And of course, as a result of being much easier to use, the repository just grows really quickly, and people start putting all of their data on it. Mm-hmm. And of course, again, talking about that default security model, it's that by default, everybody has read access to everything that you put on the site.
Everything?
Everything.
You can't do permissions so that, you know, there's certain, like marketing has that, and sales has these groups. It's just everything.
Of course you can do that.
Okay.
My observation is that when you talk about the default security model, that's also going to be, you know, on the vast majority of sites that get deployed, that's how they're going to leave it. And so, of course, you can set permissions on the various documents, and you have a group-based system like what you're describing. Mm-hmm. But I think that very few people know how to use it, and very few people go to the trouble. Yeah,
well, I mean, sysadministrators being lazy with Microsoft software, I've never heard of anything
it's an unknown
so
concept.
Absurd.
Yeah.
But I can imagine it being especially a problem when you've got a lot of intellectual property there. You got somebody who leaves the company, and what do they do right before? They plug in that USB drive and let's slurp some files down. So, right. is that the main problem, or is there some other vulnerabilities? Like what's been your research?
Yeah, my research has been threefold. The first thing has been, okay, we've got that default security model, but unfortunately what you see is that not even do people not go better than the default, but they'll actually do worse than the default, so to speak. By misconfiguring the site sometimes. And so what you can find, this is actually really scary, but if you do certain searches on Google, the Google indexer has picked up a number of SharePoint sites that were obviously deployed incorrectly, publicly on the internet, and you can see, for example, administrative pages that you shouldn't be able to see.
Really?
Yes, and there are thousands of sites that come up.
What kind of things would you search for? I mean, this really sounds like some fun Johnny I hack stuff, Google foo here. What kind of stuff are you using? What kind of queries?
You put me on the spot. I don't remember the URL names that you can look for. I did a blog post, and maybe I can plug my
give me
blog.
the link. I'll put it in the lower third. People can check that out.
Yeah, we'll do that. But anyway, if you just play with the site a little bit, again, it's free, so you can just use it as a hacker. But if you just play with the site, look at some of the admin links that come up on the on the URL in the browser, and just search for some of those admin URLs in Google, And you'll find sites that have mistakenly exposed those on the internet.
So now what do you do? What can you do with that?
Well, at that point, if you find somebody's admin URLs, then you basically could own their site.
More than just their SharePoint site? Can you get out of that, maybe get the default website?
I haven't probed that far.
Okay.
I have a feeling that because of, SharePoint's got an ASP.NET component, it's got an ISAPI component that plugs into IIS. So there's a lot of powerful stuff going on there, and I have a feeling you could do some damage. But again, I haven't proven that.
All right, so what was the tool that you've been working on?
Yeah, so the tool, back to what we were first talking about, is my observation is that once a SharePoint site gets set up, people upload everything to it. And you talked about HR information, you've got your IT people putting documents on there. I wrote a tool that lets you search for patterns using regular expressions, and it'll enumerate through all the documents in the SharePoint database. And you could, say, for example, search for a social security number pattern, or all the phone numbers in the SharePoint documents, or strong passwords, credit card numbers.
I mean, nobody would ever put social security numbers or credit cards in an Excel spreadsheet and then put them on a share somewhere.
Yeah,
it's unheard of.
Especially not all 30 million of their employees, or
And if they've got a sysadmin that's maybe right out of college, didn't pay much attention during the installation because he just wants to get a check mark on the I got SharePoint up task.
Yeah.
Then get his action items list a little lower, and next thing you know, we've got some major vulnerabilities. So what are kind of the mitigations here? What can we do if we're administrating SharePoint servers to make them a little safer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the remediation here definitely is, actually I recommend using these tools, using these techniques to kind of convince yourself of the problem and start to learn what the security patterns are that you should be understanding for your own SharePoint site. And then, indeed, dig into your site and make sure that the access controls are set the way that you expect them to be. So HR documents should only be viewable by people in the HR group, etc.
And this all interfaces with Active Directory, so if you've got a permission structure that works there, it's really easy to set up sites the same way as SharePoint, right?
I'm nervous to say that is really easy. Again, this is an area a little bit outside of what I've been experimenting with, but I'm told that actually getting your groups to translate directly from Active Directory to SharePoint isn't always the easiest thing to do. And again, so we're back to one of the reasons why people don't necessarily go to the trouble to get it configured correctly, because it can be kind of confusing.
Yeah. Very interesting stuff. So you're going to release your tool?
Of course, it's actually already on. It's on Codeplex. The name of the tool is MOSS Regex Search. MOSS is MOSS, stands for Microsoft Office SharePoint Server. That's MOSS Regex Search on Codeplex.
Great, and people can always still find you at jwsecure.com, right?
Correct.
That's awesome. Hey, thanks so very much for taking some time talking to us. Really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to seeing your speech.
Thank you.
All right.
Now it's time for this week's trivia. Ready? All right. Simply name the aircraft Darren and Robin were sitting behind on the aircraft carrier. Be the first to submit your answer to the forums, and we'll hook you up with some Hak5 stickers and other goodies. Now, this week's trivia is sponsored by Beck's, different by choice. Beck's is the #1 German export beer, and it's naturally the beer of choice during the month of October. This fall, Beck's wants to give you and a friend the opportunity to win a trip to Germany as part of its Oktoberfest celebration. Ah, the food, the people, the history. Did we mention they've got a killer hacking and techno scene? Well, anyway, if you haven't experienced Germany, you just haven't completely lived. So register for a chance to win a 1-week trip to Germany courtesy of Beck's. On your cell phone, text BECKS to BEERS to be automatically registered, or log on to becksbeer.com for the full details. Next, Darren got a chance to talk to Jacob Appelbaum about the cold boot attack.
So Jacob Appelbaum, you just gave an interesting talk about the cold boot attack, and I know a lot of people, it's really been the buzz recently, but for the people that aren't familiar with the cold boot attack, you want to explain what that is and why it's important?
Sure, yeah. So basically the cold boot attack is a couple of things. It's one, an observation about how memory, specifically DRAMs, although this applies to older memory as well, doesn't decay as we used to assume that it did. So when you turn a computer off, people think, oh, like everything just vanishes. I lost my documents, it's all gone. But actually, there's a subtle process that occurs, which is that the memory chips are made up of capacitors, essentially, and those capacitors slowly discharge. And the discharge time depends entirely on the environment. So for example, if you have a memory chip, depending on the type of memory chip, it could be anywhere from 0.1 seconds to 30 seconds before it's fully discharged, which means that it still has some semblance of data during that 30 seconds. And if you were to cool it with, say, a can of canned air, which costs $5 at the store, simply invert the can of canned air and spray the tetrafluoroethane or cold stuff onto the memory, that will increase the retention time. And essentially what that means is that you can take that RAM chip out of a computer, walk it to another computer, plug it in, and then read the data out of it. Or potentially turn the machine on that was just off and read the data out of that if you're in a hurry and you only have that computer.
Okay, so we all know that physical access, once you've got that, all bets are off.
Sure.
So what you've done is you've put together a tool so that you can restart and boot off of another device and restore the memory, or how does that work?
Well, there are a couple of tools. One of those tools actually is right here. It's this iPod, which is running stock Apple firmware. In fact, it's playing industrial goth music right now.
The only way to hack,
yeah,
obviously.
No, apparently, yeah. This was actually made by Bill Paul, another person on the team who wrote basically all of the memory scraping utilities. And basically, this you can just boot off of it. Now, this, of course, is physical access. But the reason this is kind of cute is because it's stock Apple firmware, and boot off of it hides the data.
So when you go through customs, it looks just like an Apple iPod. In fact, it even plays music just like it's supposed to.
Exactly. It is an Apple iPod. The only difference is that we've changed the partition table and we've changed the way that the disk is set up.
But it doesn't have to be an iPod. It could be a USB drive or anything like that.
Yeah, it could be a different one, like the other one that I have in here, well, somewhere. Anyway, essentially, this is for local attacks. You could do this with any USB hard drive, and basically, we also have two other payloads. One of them is called a PXE payload, which works over normal PXE BIOSes, which is most x86 machines.
So you're talking about PXE booting, like booting off a network drive?
Exactly, just like booting off a network drive. But instead of booting off a network drive, you boot off of our system, wherever it is, however you decide to deploy it.
Okay, so say like you access a machine, you've got physical access, whether it's the PXE boot or the iPod boot, you're going to have to, and you restart, and since you did the restart and not just like shutting it down and then bringing it back up, you've done essentially a cold boot where the memory is still active, so we didn't power cycle it enough. I'm assuming that's how it works. Since we didn't power cycle the memory, everything's still in there. But then when we boot off something, isn't that putting something back into memory?
So it depends on the way that it's done. There are three main ways to do it. One is with physical access with a USB disk, like the iPod method or any normal disk. The other method would be over the network with PXE booting or with EFI booting in the case of Macs,
Sure.
MacBook Pros and other Mac OS X devices that are new. And the third way would be to have a custom BIOS. In the second way, you can do it over the network. And in fact, if you were to take the payloads we'd released and modify them slightly, you would be able to make it so that they broadcast the memory out to, say, like the broadcast address of the network, and all you would have to do is sniff the network to see it. You don't need physical access.
And it would just dump the memory right into the network.
Dump the memory over the network.
Just sniff it right up and put it back to. So okay, so no matter which method you choose to do, you've got essentially as much of the memory as was possibly retained when you rebooted, or if you cooled the chips and popped it into another machine. What does that allow you to do as an attacker?
Well, as an attacker, one of the things that it allows you to do is essentially you can extract the cryptographic keys from the system. Now that could be for disk encryption, it could be for SSH sessions, it could be for SSL, it could be, there's any number of things running on a system at a given point in time where there's sensitive data in memory. And that sensitive data can lead you onto a path of recovering other sensitive data. People that use the same password in multiple places, for example, people say it's a bad idea, and it is.
It is.
It's also very possible that you have one password that unlocks, say, like a keychain, and if you had that one password, well, then you could unlock the keychain and extract all these other passwords.
So how do we scrub through the memory? So we've got the memory dump, but it's just binary, it's just nothing to us, like how do you scrub that and actually get something useful out of that? Because it's not like, do you have like a table? Is it like on a hard drive where you have like a table that you can go through and actually try to piece back together what everything is, or is it just random bits?
Well, I mean, it's funny. In some cases, depending on the amount of time that has passed by, it's possible that there are a lot of random bits, which is why the AES Key Finder program that we released, it actually will do an intelligent analysis on the data that it sees, and it will basically be able to detect whether or not it is a cryptographic key.
So we've got some signatures. We're like, that looks like an AES key, or this looks like an RSA key?
Well, it's not signature based in the traditional way of thinking about a signature, but essentially, yes, there is a test that one can perform, and that performing that test will allow you to determine if it's an AES key. Then we do another test, which is an entropy test, to determine if it is an AES key, is it random enough? And then we can know, like, if it's all zeros, for example, we throw that out, it's probably not the key.
Sounds like a really interesting tool for not just, you know, on the black hat side of things, but also if you're doing forensics. And I'm sure, you know, law enforcement must be all over this.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, so what's the mitigation factor here? If I'm concerned about my own personal, like my laptop, you know, and I leave it for a few moments to go, and then I come back and my RAM's gone, or like, what should I do?
Well, basically, if you have a laptop and you take it with you, you should probably never suspend it to RAM. You should probably not suspend it to disk unless it requires a password when you turn it back on, and not a login screen, but like a pre-boot authentication password, so that when you power the machine on. So
is a BIOS password going to protect me here?
No, a BIOS password will almost certainly harm you, at least against a dedicated attacker. And the reason is because a BIOS password will stop the machine from booting and continue to apply power to the memory and sit there and wait forever.
And at that point, you can what? Just try again, or?
Exactly. You could try to do something else. You could pull the hard drive out, replace it with your hard drive, and you could do that while the machine is on, potentially. And as a result of being able to do that, you know the BIOS probably doesn't have like a advanced intrusion detection system built into it because it's proprietary software and it hasn't been extended. And if it doesn't have that, you're in bad shape.
Okay, so what needs to change to make this less of a problem, or do you see it as a problem?
I mean, I think it's a problem in that currently one way that people protect themselves against unreasonable search and seizures in a warrantless seizure world is that they encrypt the data on their computer.
Exactly. I would just recently go in Canada. Don't go to Canada without having your stuff true encrypted. Am I doing the right thing? Is that smart, or is that, you know, snake oil? Is it false?
Well, I like TrueCrypt. I think that that's a really cool project. It's one of the best free software projects around, actually. But in our paper, we broke TrueCrypt. I mean, broke is a little bit overextending. What we were able to do was reliably decrypt a TrueCrypt encrypted disk if someone can get to this point.
So if I open my TrueCrypt file and then it stores the key in memory, and then if you can just go ahead and dump the memory, you can grab the key, and then all bets are off, right?
Right, exactly.
So if I'm crossing the border, I get my stuff TrueCrypted like a good person, I should make sure that my machine is off.
Right, and you should also make sure that you don't have some sort of suspend to disk or RAM where you've previously left a full dump of memory. I mean, I don't know how TrueCrypt handles suspend to RAM or suspend to disk these days, but if there is a way for your computer to override the software control that TrueCrypt might have in place, there is a possibility that you could accidentally leak key material. Although I don't know that about TrueCrypt for sure, it is definitely a problem in general with software. Like if you have a program that is open and you suspend the computer, that means that program's memory is written out somewhere in some way. And if that's not encrypted and it doesn't require a password to decrypt that data, in the case of macOS 10 where it doesn't require you to decrypt the data with a password, but it is encrypted somehow, that could be a huge problem, and you could end up screwing the pooch on that issue, even if the software is really great.
Okay, so what kind of practices do you think the industry should adopt to kind of mitigate this?
I think it would make a lot of sense to have integrated temperature sensors in a computer and to be able to set interrupts and alarms so that in the event of a temperature dropping, you could wipe certain bits of memory.
Okay.
It would be good to probably extend MAdvise so that you could have programs say, these bits of my memory are extremely sensitive. In the event of a panic of some sort, I want you to erase them first. And then it would be a race. And the race could be that if you are shutting down your computer, you know for sure that those bits were killed before the computer shut down.
Because when we say your computer may be a server co-located at some facility. So exactly like you're saying, like the temperature goes down, it may be because the case is opened, and some BIOSes will let you know if the BIOS is if the case door actually opened, but maybe not. So you're saying that we should take intrusion detection past like the actual virtual network, but into the physical realm?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that it would be really nice if we had secure cryptographic code processors on machines, like a PCMCIA or card bus card that you could slide in, and you could say, here's a block of data, give me the encrypted data back, and you could have the key set up on the card, for example. You could probably do something like that with an FPGA. That would be a useful step forward, because what it would mean is that you would have this piece of hardware that you could program, and thus you could probably audit And as a result of that, you'd be able to trust it a little bit more than just doing straight software crypto. And there's nothing wrong with software crypto, but there are limitations to the security that it can provide in certain cases. And in the case of someone that runs a mail server, I mean, you're pretty SOL in this case. There isn't really a lot that you can do about it because you can't have like a proximity sensor.
Yeah.
What can happen is that an attacker can come to your colo facility, and they can plug in a power sink, and the power sink will basically phase shift to be synchronized with the wall power, and then it'll backfeed the power into the computer if it's on a power strip.
So do they like just actually tap into the leads on the power supply?
There are multiple ways to do it. That's one of the ways to do it. Another way is that if you have a computer plugged into like a power strip of sorts, it'll plug into that, and it'll phase sync with that power and backfeed the entire power strip.
So you can actually power the back way through it and then unplug it, and
then you can unplug it, and then you can
pick up the server, put it in your black van, and run off.
Or even better, you can also then strip the Ethernet cable, and you can basically wire up a loopback by doing like a
got my little
tap.
alligator clips, and now I'm feeling very beige box-ish, but yeah.
Right, something like that. You can basically it's what you needed to boot the old Sun like Spark stations or UltraSpark or whichever ones it was that you needed the loopback. Instead of having the loopback for booting, you could tap it, have the loopback. It would cause network collision errors at first, but then when you stop sending data because you're no longer attached to the network and you're not receiving data anymore, I mean, you still have a link.
And there you're right in the middle.
And right, so you still have a link.
Forget the ARP cache, you're like right in the wire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that's like super low tech. There are probably better ways to do it, but you could link stays up, power stays up, roll the machine out, and as far as the machine thinks, the machine is having problems reaching maybe the upstream router, or maybe the switch is having issues for a second, depending on how you pull the attack off.
But this is the stuff that the internet was made to just go against or not be disrupted by. It's like, oh, let me go correct this, so it's not going to really cause any alarms per se, because this just happens like, oh, a packet dropped. Big deal.
Right, or like 1,000 packets dropped, and my upstream might be down. Send a page to someone.
Okay, so you've explained the Core Boot project. That's the tool where you can boot off the PXE or the iPod. You said something earlier in your talk about the payloads. Do you want to touch on a little bit of what that is?
Well, there's a little confusion here. Core Boot it used to be the Linux BIOS project.
Okay.
And now it's called the Core Boot project, and I'm not a part of it. I've just simply seen it, I've worked with it a little bit, and I rather like the project. But the previous payloads were written by Bill Paul. They're free software. They're at sitep.princeton.edu/memory/code or something. Totally separate from Core Boot. Core Boot, being the free software BIOS implementation, has this concept of payloads, and essentially you can write a program like Tetris and then run it in the BIOS, assuming that you have a BIOS that's supported by Core Boot. And I just bought a motherboard, it's a gigabyte board, and that supports it, so I can flash the BIOS. You could, for example, write a payload that dumped all the memory.
Okay, so this is what you would use to build, your rig, that you would cool the memory, pop it into that machine, boot up off of it, and then that's the software that would actually do the dumping if you weren't just going to restart that machine.
Right. Unfortunately, it's very powerful and very useful. This is good though because you can use this to scrub the memory when you turn the machine off, or to make certain BIOS callbacks that could scrub the memory.
Sure.
So that's useful for a defender, but as an attacker's tool, what it would allow you to do essentially is to dump all of the memory without actually touching the memory. See, the USB disk and the memory payloads.
You're going to have to load your program into memory to dump it, so you're going to overwrite something.
Right, exactly.
And it could be something good, but it could just be junk.
Right, so some people have suggested, well, store your crypto keys at this specific physical address and you have no problems, because that's where the BIOS loads.
Yeah. In
this particular case, that means you take the memory out, you put it into this, and you don't have that problem. And you need one motherboard per electrical interface that you would like to be able to attack.
But motherboards are cheap, and this sounds like so are these tools freely available?
Core Boot is available from coreboot.info, I think is the website, and that's freely available. It's GPL software, and the software we release is under the BSD license. That's the RSA key finder and the AES key finder and the AES key repair code, as well as the Pixie boot bootloader scraper and the USB scraper.
Great. So where can our audience find more information about your research?
Well, my research, I don't know, it just comes up sometimes. I don't work for any particular group that I publish research with. I'm just...
Okay, so is there any particular website you'd say that they should check out for further reading on this subject?
No.
No?
Not really, no. I mean, I have my own website, but it currently has one link to my PGP key and nothing else. I'm not really a web design person. So.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for talking to us.
Super appreciate it. Thanks.
Darren's travel tip number 91.
If you're stuck with a 4-hour layover in BFE and want to have a little fun, head to the food court and fire up Jasager. If there's free Wi-Fi around, go ahead and take advantage of it. Share your internet connection out through your Jasager, either via Wi-Fi or if you've got a 3G phone tethered, even better. Now most of the clients around you will be connected to the Concourse Wi-Fi, so you'll need to de-authenticate them before they'll hop on your Jasager. I prefer loading up a modded Nintendo DS with Aircrack and setting it to infinitely broadcast de-auth packets. The range on the DS is rather weak, so you'll need to send a friend over to the targets in order to disconnect them. Now sit back, maybe fire up Ferret, and enjoy your layover. This travel tip brought to you by Dead Space. Dead Space is EA's first survival horror game, and it was created by a hand-picked team of horror fanatics. It's a terrifying game that deserves its M rating, so wusses need not apply. To survive in Dead Space is all about the strategic dismemberment of your enemies, and it's all set in a horrific sci-fi environment. You'll explore the gritty bowels of the damaged USG Ishimura, a deep space mining ship, and its amazing zero-G environment that allows you to employ an entirely unique way to blast your way through enemies. Well, we haven't had a chance to play Dead Space yet, but we've heard amazing things from the TRS crew, and it was one of the top games that they played at E3. In fact, Dead Space recently won the Game Critics Award Best of E3 2008 Best Action Adventure Game, and it's in stores October 16th, so go ahead and pre-order your copy at deadspace.ea.com.
Also, be sure to check out episode 30 of Pop Siren, where Mujan shows you how to throw the best presidential debate party ever and gives you the inside scoop on the top places you should flee to if the economy gets any worse or we experience an unfortunate election turnout. I, for one, will probably end up going to Toronto, Canada. New episodes of Pop Siren release every Thursday at noon Pacific. As our day at Tourcon ends and we head out to all the after parties, we must say thanks to all the great people that made the event truly spectacular. In particular, David Holton, aka Hikari, and George Spillman, aka Geo. We did an interview with them as well, but due to some bad choices in location and very strong winds, much of it is inaudible.
Didn't have one, so we threw that together after a few years. We finally went to our first hacker conference, DEF CON.
If you're interested, it'll be posted as supplemental material on Hak5.org. Anyway, we had a really great time at Tourcon, and I hope to see you there next year. So, until next time,
trust your techno is.
Yeah, you know me, quote, working from home, unquote, it's easy, turn a 2-day weekend into 3, CBD within reach, TXT to MSG to BD.
Vibrations in my pocket, it's my phone, it says I do it, it's the auto beat commander, he's just saying what I'm doing, your retail work politely, I'm hardly feeling mighty, think about taking off early, log on and I'm alrighty.
Wait a minute, huh? There might have been a disconnect, man, in the middle attack, I had to intercept and add a few words, my freestyle was so bad, I burned down my notepad and opened up my vocab, so that's where it's coming from. Another album, #1.
I want one so bad.
The window says photography is prohibited.
Hi, this is Mahalo Daily, and we're with Pinkberry. Do you like the Pinkberry? I enjoy Pinkberry. I'm Leah Devillia with Mahalo Daily. Mahalo!